All right, so The Wild Robot. This movie just came out, and I didn't really have high expectations for this movie. I think I saw the trailer for it when it first dropped around the Super Bowl. There was this 30-second teaser that did what a lot of really good teasers do. It didn't have any dialogue, didn't have any plot information. It really just was a really short trailer with the What a Wonderful World, that song. Very epic version playing. First of all, that is a really great song, especially the epic version. I remember they played that with Dr. Dolittle, the terrible Robert Downey Jr. movie. But guys, there's a total difference in movies. Like, I do have to explain. The Dolittle one was really manipulating you because that movie was just awful, really corny, like the opposite of this. It had an adventure in it, but it was really just bad jokes. There was like no soul to that movie. Still fun. I've oddly seen that movie like more than twice, which is bad, but I think I've more just like kind of watched it for fun because it's like so bad it's good. But The Wild Robot uses this song in its trailer, and it actually like earns it because I did just see it. We both just saw it, and it was really great. But what I really think was like the best part about this movie was then they did have another trailer that came out and they included dialogue. I kind of avoided that trailer because I didn't know anything about this movie.
I didn't see any trailer.
I think I saw, or we both did actually, maybe we both just like kind of ignored it. I did definitely ignore the trailers with plot in it because I've never heard of The Wild Robot. Very rare now to get an original animated film. There's always sequels. There's How to Train Your Dragon. There's a remake of How to Train Your Dragon coming out. This is the director of How to Train Your Dragon. He made this. And it's from DreamWorks, who did Shrek, Puss in Boots, The Bad Guys. These are movies that I always associate with like being very like kids films, like young kids, very easy to watch. Same with like those Despicable Me movies, which are from Illumination. And even Pixar's Inside Out 2 seems more like grounded for kids. I say that because there's just like more of a consistent like manic energy to that. I like this more than any of them, and we just did a review for Inside Out 2, and I've reviewed Despicable Me 4, and both those movies like had these issues to me where there were just these plots that felt like kind of like lumpy, like you were kind of going through the motions with Inside Out 2, like no pun intended, going through the emotions, but it really wasn't as great of a plot as The Wild Robot. The Wild Robot just does everything right. It's a beautiful story. It's about a robot. Jenna, you tell us what the movie's about.
So it's about a robot who, I guess, en route to wherever it was supposed to go, the ship it was in crashed and then ended up on this random island. And so when the robot turned on, its goal was to find like a task. And on the island was just these wild animals. And the wild animals kind of looked at it as a monster, and it's kind of just its story of finding its way through the island and meeting characters that become friends and even ending up being somewhat of a mother to one of the baby animals who kind of gets attached to the robot. And it's just a story that takes on, you know, the issues of technological advances taking over, like, natural forests and stuff like that, but also other topics like adoption in a way, because if you watch it, you'll understand, and it just hit home for me, at least. I cried like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, damn straight, that robot was a monster, though, you gotta admit. I'm just kidding.
No.
That's kind of the point of the movie, is that you have to learn to obviously accept things that might not be what they seem like.
Oh, also pushing boundaries that you were quote unquote programmed for or brought up, and knowing that you don't have to, you can break that barrier down and become and do more than what you were quote unquote supposed to be capable of. So it's a movie also for the underdogs, and it just shows that you are capable of anything that you put your mind to, as long as you go into it with 100%.
Yeah, I really loved it. I only had like one issue with the movie. Do you remember the scene I was talking about?
I think so.
The one with the bullies.
Yeah.
But really, that didn't even take me out of the movie, guys. There's one scene where like Kit Connor as a duck or goose. I thought his name was Ryan Gosling for a second, because the whole movie they're like calling him Ryan Gosling.
No.
And I was like, he's literally me.
They weren't.
I felt the Kenergy. I felt the Kenergy from this movie. But no, for real, it was just a great movie. Also, the animation style is very unique. Had this kind of like hand-drawn 2D style, which you don't really get in movies. I was looking up that they were inspired by the Studio Ghibli movies, just because it wasn't that hand-drawn, but it still wasn't as 3D. We did see it actually in 4D, 3D. Very great way to see this movie. It really was a great just 4D movie, so immersive, because you actually like feel, I thought, more like the robot at parts. Even like you feel like the little duck that the robot has to raise, right? Because it's kind of the story.
It's a goose.
It's a goose, yeah. Did you like that, the whole story of the robot kind of having to raise that goose?
Yeah, I loved it. It was amazing.
Yeah, it really just had this great story. And it's funny because it's one of those movies where I didn't check my phone the whole time. I usually don't. Some movies, though, like we saw Megalopolis and it was like, fuck, how much longer is left of this shit? But in this movie, it's great because I kept thinking, like, is that it? Because the movie, like, really just immerses you and you're so involved in the story. Also, it's a very confident movie, which I can say for, like, Inside Out 2, which is constantly telling you things. Like, Inside Out 2 is like, this is Riley's sense of self. This is Riley's friends. This is, like, girls, like, Riley wants to impress. Like, it's constantly telling you things. And to me, that's, like, distracting. It doesn't feel as real. There's, like, 2 moments, like, where Riley just does awkward things. Then we be like, oh, she leaves her friends to go, like, with the older girls. Or she, like, shoves her friend. And it's, like, that's it. And also, that movie just takes place, like, in a weekend at, like, a girls' hockey camp. Like, just look at the scale of that movie. Yeah, it's in her mind. I thought the first Inside Out obviously like had a bigger scale. Just it had like a girl trying to run away from home in a new city. The scale of the first one was just a lot bigger. But like Wild Robot, the scale's like massive. Just with how you're dealing with like the adventures they go on. You get to like go on a migration with these birds. And the crazy thing is, it's pretty like simple. It's not like a lot happens plot wise. It's more just this, like, on a minor scale, like the microcosm of this like epic journey just in nature.
Yeah,
I feel like that sounded so pretentious, but it's true. Like, you're just following a duck or goose. It was a goose. Yeah. You follow this goose growing up, and because he doesn't have parents, or it's just this egg, so the robot finds this egg and he raises it. And I know you really like that part, just because that became like the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what we were going to get. I heard of the Wild Robot. I kind of knew there was going to be some conflict, obviously, because the trailer like included a line where it's like, don't let them get away, which I think is the line Stephanie Sue's character says at the end when she's like the robot. But I loved how minor the conflict was. Like, it isn't like you have this like big villain like looming or monologuing. It's just like, it all feels very natural to what the story's trying to get out. You know that this robot is just kind of lost, and I love that for the most of the first hour, it's just her in nature. The first 10 minutes is so confident in that there's no dialogue. It's just the robot kind of like exploring. There is actually dialogue, but really the animals don't speak. It's just her kind of exploring nature. Then she learns and kind of processes everything, and it really just feels, I think, like such a natural movie. Like I'm just comparing it to Inside Out, because Inside Out just has to explain everything for you. The Wild Robot just kind of shows it. It doesn't tell you, and always, show don't tell. That's like one of my big things when I see a movie. It just definitely feels more impactful here. And also, just on top of that, this story unfolds over 2 hours or less. It's like an hour 40, but it really doesn't feel like that. Like, it isn't until about an hour, more than an hour in, I thought that like the robot actually puts the transmitter in and decides to like call home, and that feels so, like, to me, I love that, how it's been more than an hour in, and then you actually see there's like people who are like, from this big Universal Dynamics, wherever the robot came from, which is probably like Amazon or Google or whatever, or SpaceX, Elon. I wonder if Elon saw this.
No.
Probably not. He's like, that's not fair. He's like, that's my robot. He could have been in the post-credits scene. I thought he was going to be. Like, sir, there's a Roz robot that's still out there. And he's like, good. No, but it was just great. It was just great. And yeah, what did you think just about how the movie kind of didn't have, the conflict was more just this emotional story of a robot kind of existing in the wild and getting to deal with these minor conflicts, like trying to help these animals who get stuck in a cold or like in a blizzard, and she helps them. Like, all the emotion and the story kind of comes from someone not fitting in and the robot kind of trying to then step in and saying like, no, we can fix this or we can work together. Like the message being,
I think it works perfectly.
Yeah.
With a movie like this, I think it works perfectly. I think the way they went about it was perfect, and I think it could have easily have been like messed up, and we could have watched it and been like, well, what is this? There's nothing to it, I guess.
well, yeah, the message being like, you can be anyone's family, you can form a bond with anyone. It doesn't matter if you're the same blood, same species, you know, whatever. Like the animals, they put like predators in the same room together, and that's like supposed to be a big. I like that scene where Pedro Pascal's fox gives like a monologue, but it was great. The point of, you know, we can all work together.
Exactly.
And he even says they have a good thing, like for this time we're like in the space together, we can like figure out a way, like, which is kind of smart because I'm like, they're literally like the food chain doesn't work that way. But I mean, I think in this movie they actually built a logic that totally worked. It's just a great movie. Kids will definitely like it. I think it's not like, don't go in expecting a movie like The Minions where it's just kind of like nothing really happening.
Yeah.
Like where there's no real story, just gags. This movie cleverly incorporates fun little gags into a great story. Like remember where the duck is like picking up sticks and like keeps wanting to help?
Yeah.
And that works because it's like what a child would do.
Yeah.
And she's even like, this is like pointless, you're not helping, but it just becomes part of that. It's just it's unexpectedly a story about motherhood. It's a story about nature and technology. It's a story about family, about friendship.
Yeah.
And it's a really moving, epic story. I was kind of expecting something like The Iron Giant, but I'm glad it was very different. You never saw The Iron Giant,
No.
did you? The Iron Giant is really great, and that more focuses on the human side, like a human interaction with a robot. Very much like E.T., to be honest. But I thought that this movie did a good job at just kind of showing, like, in nature. It was a totally different take, honestly, and it really did work, just seeing the robot interacting with animals, then eventually being called back to home. And I did like the ending. Really, they did a great job with the ending. I think it was perfect. Like, really hard to fuck that up, too, because we're really easy to fuck it up. Like, I was kind of expecting it to be somewhat dark. Not dark, but somber. And it kind of was going somber, where you're like, she leaves, but there is a purpose. She helps them find their way. Her place is somewhere else, like, and she knows that. But she still did her task of, you know, raising a kid. It's a great, great story, but then it still does have this really earned ending where she's helped her, you know, goose, I keep saying duck. Well, she helps the gosling, like, fly, and then when he comes to visit her, it's like, oh, that's like a perfect ending, because it's just a great ending, and it really... I know, you were sobbing during that movie.
So good.
I remember the scene where they were flying, and it's in 4D, so like the seats are like shaking too, and I just hear you like shaking in the seat, and you're like, oh my god. I mean, it was very emotional.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, that's The Wild Robot. See it in 4D, see it in 3D. Those are the options. Just see it in general. I feel like young kids aren't gonna really care what format. So yeah, go see that. It's really good, really worth seeing in just the format I saw it in, and really just a nice surprise. I love going to see a movie where I kind of don't have any expectations. Again, this was an animated film. Usually these movies are sequels. They're like Inside Out 2, Despicable Me 4, Kung Fu Panda 4. There was the Garfield movie, but, you know, we've seen Garfield before. Like, everyone knows what Garfield is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so I kind of was just like, I don't know what to expect from this, and it ended up being a great surprise. So, yeah, definitely up there. I don't know. I don't want to, like, start comparisons with, like, Spider-Verse and all that, just because they're, like, totally different types of movies. Like, no, we'll get into that debate another time. No, they're both great. But, yeah. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. See you on the other side. Take it easy.